The searchlights were blinding. Danny shielded his eyes with one hand while keeping his other arm around Kira. She was pressed close to him, trembling but not from weakness. She was angry. He could feel the tension in her muscles, the predator instinct that was fighting to come out. "Do not move," Danny whispered to her. "Not yet." Commander Shaw walked toward them slowly, savoring the moment. His officers formed a tight circle around the landing field, weapons pointed at Danny, Kira, and the ship. There was no escape route, no way out. "I knew something was wrong about you," Shaw said to Danny, a former combat medic living alone in a junkyard. "Too quiet, too careful. You were hiding something. I just needed to wait for you to make a mistake." "She is not a threat," Danny said. "She is a victim. Traffickers captured her and tortured her. I was just trying to get her home." Shaw laughed. It was an ugly sound. "A victim? She is a Dracorian. Her kind are enemies of the Consortium. Do you have any idea how much a live Dracorian is worth? The research value alone is enormous." Danny felt sick. Shaw did not care about law or order. He did not care about protecting humanity from threats. He only cared about profit and power. Kira was nothing more than a prize to him. "You are the monster here," Danny said quietly. "Not her." Shaw's smile disappeared. His eyes went cold and dangerous. "Arrest them. All of them. The alien goes into containment. The humans go to holding cells until I decide what to do with them." The officers moved forward. Danny's mind raced, searching for any option, any chance. And then he remembered something. The Junkyard's old perimeter defenses. When the colony was first established, Kepler 7b had been a dangerous place. Native predators, unstable terrain, equipment failures. The early settlers had installed automated defense systems around their camps. Most of those systems had been decommissioned years ago, but some of them had ended up in the Junkyard. Danny had repaired a few of them as a hobby, keeping them functional just in case. He had linked them to a remote trigger on his communicator dot. It was a desperate plan. Crazy, even. But it was all he had dot. Danny pressed the hidden button on his communicator dot. Half a mile away, the Junkyard came alive. Automated turrets rose from the piles of scrap, firing warning shots into the sky. Alarm sirens screamed across the night. Lights flashed in chaotic patterns. Shaw spun around, his face twisting with confusion. "What is that? Report." The officers were distracted, turning to look at the distant commotion. For just a moment, the circle around Danny and Kira loosened. "Now," Danny said. Kira moved like lightning. She spread her wings and grabbed Danny under the arms, lifting him off the ground. They shot into the air, flying low and fast toward the ship. Behind them, officers shouted and fired, but their shots went wide. Grace Chun was already at the controls. The moment Danny and Kira landed on the boarding ramp, she hit the engines. The ship lurched upward, climbing fast into the dark sky. Shaw screamed orders at his men. One of the officers ran to a launcher and fired a tracking missile. Danny watched through a window as the missile streaked toward them, its guidance system locking on dot. And then something unexpected happened. The young officer, Goodwin, ran to the launcher controls. He hesitated for just a second, then his fingers moved across the panel. The missile wobbled, then veered off course, exploding harmlessly in the distance. Shaw turned on Goodwin with fury. "What did you do?" Goodwin stood straight, his voice shaking but determined. "I disabled the guidance, sir." "You, traitor. You will face a military court for this." But Goodwin just looked up at the ship disappearing into the clouds, and there was something like relief on his face. He had made his choice. The ship broke through the atmosphere and entered the cold darkness of space. Hank pushed the engines to maximum, and the stars blurred as they accelerated toward neutral territory. Danny sat on the floor of the cargo hold, breathing hard. His heart was still pounding. He could barely believe they had made it. Kira sat beside him. Her golden eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling. "You saved me," she said. "Again." "We saved each other," Danny replied. 3 hours later, they reached the border of neutral space. Hank slowed the ship and sent out a general hail on Dracorian frequencies. The response came almost immediately. A Dracorian patrol vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel, appearing beside them like a great wind shadow. It was beautiful and terrifying, its hull covered in patterns that looked like scales. Kira stood at the observation window, staring at the ship. Her ship, her people. "They came," she whispered. They actually came. A shuttle detached from the patrol vessel and approached Hank's ship. Danny walked with Kira to the airlock where the shuttle would dock. They stood there together, not speaking. There was too much to say and not enough time to say it. "I have to go," Kira said finally. "I know," Danny said. She turned to face him. She was not the broken, terrified girl he had found in that escape pod. She was strong now, healed, ready to return to her people and her life. "I will never forget what you did for me," Kira said. "You taught me that humans can be kind, that you can be good. I will tell my people about you, Danny Cole. I will make sure they know." Danny nodded. His throat was tight, and he did not trust his voice. Kira stepped forward and pressed her forehead against his. Her scales were cool, but the gesture was warm. Intimate. It was. She had told him once, the deepest sign of respect and love among her people. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Then she turned and walked through the airlock into the waiting shuttle. Danny watched until the door closed, and then he watched the shuttle return to the patrol vessel. A moment later, those ships disappeared into faster-than-light, leaving only empty space and distant stars. 2 weeks later, Danny was back in his junkyard. The inquiry had been difficult, but Lucy, Hank, and surprisingly Goodwin had all testified on his behalf. The consortium could not afford a public scandal showing their security forces hunting a trafficking victim. Shaw was quietly reassigned to a distant outpost. The charges against Danny were dropped. Life returned to something like normal. Danny sorted salvage. Lucy came by in the evenings to share meals. Hank sent messages from time to time, complaining about freight contracts and asking if Danny needed any help. One morning, Danny found a small package on his doorstep. There was no return address, no shipping information. Just a plain box with his name on it. Inside, resting on soft cloth, was a single Dracorian scale. It was deep blue, shimmering with an inner light that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the visible spectrum. Beside it was a note, written in careful handwriting. "Family is not blood. Family is choice. Thank you, Danny." "Kira." Danny held the scale in his hand, feeling its strange coolness against his skin. He thought about everything that had happened. The fear and the danger and the desperate escape. The trust they had built. The friendship that had grown between two people who should have been enemies. He walked outside and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, among the countless stars, Kira was home with her people. Safe. Free. Telling stories about a human who had chosen to help her when no one else would. Danny smiled. It was a real smile, the kind he had forgotten how to make. He had spent years hiding in this junkyard, running from his past and the pain he carried. But Kira had reminded him of something important, something he had almost forgotten. The universe could be cruel and dark, but it could also be kind. And sometimes, all it took was one person making the choice to help. One person deciding that kindness was worth the risk. Danny put the scale in his pocket and went back to work. The salvage would not sort itself, but now, as he worked, he found himself looking up at the stars more often, wondering what was out there, hoping that somewhere in the vast darkness, a young dragon girl was flying free and maybe, just maybe, telling others about the human who had saved her life. Hank Morrison arrived 3 days later. He came in an old freight ship that looked like it had seen better decades, landing at a small private field about 10 miles from the Junkyard. Danny drove out to meet him in Lucy's battered transport vehicle, leaving Kira hidden safely with Lucy. Hank had aged since Danny last saw him. His hair was gray now, and his face had more lines than Danny remembered. But his eyes were still sharp, and his handshake was still firm. "Danny Cole," Hank said, shaking his head slowly. "When I got your message, I thought someone was playing a joke on me. You never call. You never write. And then suddenly you need help smuggling an alien off-world." "I know it is a lot to ask," Danny said. "A lot?" Hank laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You are asking me to risk everything I have built. I went legitimate, Danny. I have a real business now. Contracts with mining companies. A reputation. I saved your life on Meridian 4, Danny said quietly. You told me that if I ever needed anything, you would be there." Hank's expression softened. He looked away, staring at the distant mountains on the horizon. "Yeah," he said finally. "I did say that. And I meant it." They talked for a long time. Danny told Hank everything about Kira, about what had been done to her and why she needed to escape. Hank listened without interrupting. When Danny finished, the old smuggler was quiet for a long moment. "Trafficking," Hank said, his voice hard. "I hate traffickers. They are the worst kind of scum in the galaxy. Will you help?" Danny asked. Hank sighed, heavily. Then he nodded. "I have a pilot named Grace Chun. Best flyer I've ever seen. She can get us through the consortium checkpoints. But we need to move fast. Your friend Shaw has been sending alerts to every port in the sector. He knows something is happening. They made a plan. Hank would bring his ship to an abandoned landing field closer to the Junkyard in 2 nights. Danny would get Kira there, hidden in a modified cargo container that Lucy was building. Once they reached neutral space, Kira could send a signal to her people and arrange for pickup. It was risky. Everything could go wrong in 100 different ways. But it was the only chance they had. Danny returned to the Junkyard and told Kira and Lucy the plan. Kira was quiet as she listened, her golden eyes thoughtful. "You are risking so much," she said to Danny when Lucy went to work on the cargo container. "All of you. For someone you barely know." "I know you well enough," Danny said. Kira stood up and walked to the window of the trailer. She looked out at the Junkyard, at the piles of broken machines and rusted metal that had become her sanctuary. "I want to tell you something about my people," she said softly. "We are not the monsters the consortium says we are. We do not want war. We never did." Danny joined her at the window. "Then why the Cold War? Why all the tension?" "Because the consortium wants our worlds," Kira said. "Our homeworlds have resources they need for their expansion. Rare minerals. Energy sources. They tried to negotiate at first, offering us trade agreements that would have made us dependent on them. When we refused, they started spreading lies about us, calling us dangerous, saying we were planning to attack human colonies. And people believed it," Danny said. "People believe what they are told to believe." Kira turned to look at him. "My people are artists, Danny. Scholars. We have songs that are older than human civilization. We have libraries that contain the knowledge of 1,000 generations. Yes, we are warriors when we need to be. We defend what is ours. But we do not seek conflict." Danny thought about all the propaganda he had seen over the years. The news reports painting Dracorians as savage predators. The military briefings warning about their dangerous capabilities. He had accepted it all without question. "I am sorry," he said. "For what my people have done? For what they believe." Kira shook her head. You have nothing to apologize for. You showed me that not all humans are the same. There are good ones and bad ones, just like any species." She paused. "When I return to my people, I will tell them about you. I will tell them that a human saved my life when he did not have to. That he protected me and healed me and asked for nothing in return. You do not have to do that," Danny said. "I want to," Kira said. "Maybe it will help. Maybe if enough stories like this are told, things can change. Maybe we do not have to be enemies forever." The night before the escape, Danny could not sleep. He sat outside the trailer, looking up at the stars. Kira came out to join him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Her wings were fully healed now, and she moved with a grace that Danny had not seen before. "Are you scared?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Yes," Danny admitted. "I would be stupid not to be. But you are still going to help me, of course." Kira was silent for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Her scaled fingers were cool against his skin, but the gesture was warm. "Among my people, there is a word for someone who does what you are doing," she said. "It does not translate exactly into common, but the closest meaning is something like protector of strangers. It is one of the highest honors we can give." Danny did not know what to say, so he just held her hand and watched the stars. The next evening, everything was ready. Lucy had finished the cargo container, complete with air supply and padding to make the journey comfortable. Hank had confirmed that his ship was in position. Grace Chun had plotted a course that would avoid the main consortium patrol routes. They loaded Kira into Lucy's transport and headed for the abandoned landing field. The night was dark, with clouds covering the moons. Danny drove while Lucy kept watch for any signs of pursuit. They were halfway there when Lucy's communicator buzzed with an emergency alert. Her face went pale as she read the message. "Shaw," she said. "He knows. Someone tipped him off. He is heading to the landing field with a full security team." Danny's grip tightened on the steering controls. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 20 minutes before they get there." 20 minutes. It was not enough time. Not even close. But Danny did not slow down. He pushed the transport faster, racing through the darkness toward the landing field. They had come too far to give up now. When they arrived, Hank's ship was waiting, its engines already warming up. Grace Chun was standing at the boarding ramp, waving them forward urgently. "We have to go now," she shouted. "Consortium ships are incoming." They got Kira out of the transport just as the first security vehicles appeared on the horizon. Lights flashing, sirens blaring. Hank looked at Danny with grim determination. "Get her on the ship. I will handle the systems." Danny lifted Kira and ran toward the ramp. But before they could reach it, the security vehicles surrounded the landing field. Searchlights blinded them. Armed officers poured out, weapons raised. And at the center of it all, Commander Victor Shaw stepped forward with a cold smile on his face. "Going somewhere?" Shaw asked. Thought they were trapped. The consortium security vehicles arrived at the Junkyard just after midnight. Danny watched them through the window of his trailer, counting the figures that emerged. 6 officers in dark uniforms, carrying weapons and scanning equipment. Leading them was a tall man with cold eyes and a face that looked like it had never smiled. Danny had already hidden Kira beneath his trailer. There was an underground bunker that he had built years ago for storing valuable salvage. It was small and dark, but it was the safest place he could think of. He had given Kira water, a blanket, and a small light. He had told her to stay quiet no matter what she heard. "I will come back for you," he had promised. "Trust me." Kira had looked at him with those golden eyes, full of fear, but also something else. Faith. She believed him. Now Danny stepped outside to meet the officers. He kept his face calm and his hands visible. He had dealt with consortium security before. They were bullies who enjoyed their power. The best way to handle them was to be cooperative and boring. "Good evening, officers," Danny said. "Can I help you with something?" The tall man with the cold eyes stepped forward. His uniform had more decorations than the others. He was clearly in charge. "I am Commander Victor Shaw," the man said. His voice was smooth and dangerous, like a snake preparing to strike. "We are conducting a search of this area. There have been reports of suspicious activity." "Suspicious activity?" Danny said, keeping his voice steady. "Out here? The only activity in this junkyard is me sorting through scrap metal." Shaw smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We will see about that. My men will search your property. You will wait here." Danny wanted to refuse. Every instinct told him to fight back, to protect Kira, but he knew that would only make things worse. So he stood there, watching as the officers spread out across the junkyard with their scanners and flashlights. One of the younger officers stayed, near Danny. He was barely more than a kid himself, with nervous eyes and a grip on his weapon that was too tight. His name tag said Goodwin. "Sorry about this," Goodwin said quietly. "Commander Shaw is very thorough." Danny said nothing. He watched Shaw moving through the junkyard, studying everything with those cold eyes. The commander was smart. Danny could see it in the way he moved, the way he observed. This was not a man who missed details. The search went on for over an hour. Officers went through Danny's trailer, opening cabinets and looking under furniture. They scanned the area around the bunker entrance, and Danny felt his heart stop for a moment. But the entrance was well hidden, and the scanners did not detect anything unusual. Finally, Shaw returned to where Danny was standing. The commander looked frustrated. He had found nothing, and that clearly annoyed him. "You live alone out here," Shaw said. It was not a question. "I do," Danny replied. "I like the quiet." A former combat medic, living in a junkyard. Shaw studied him carefully. "That seems like a waste of talent." "I saw enough blood in the war," Danny said. "Now, I prefer machines. They do not scream when you fix them." Shaw's eyes narrowed slightly. Danny could tell that the commander did not believe him. But without evidence, there was nothing Shaw could do. "We will be watching this area," Shaw said. "If you see anything unusual, you will report it immediately. Is that understood?" "Understood," Danny said. Shaw turned and walked back to his vehicle. The other officers followed. Goodwin gave Danny one last apologetic look before joining them. Then they were gone, their vehicles disappearing into the night. Danny waited until he was sure they were far away. Then he ran to the bunker and opened the hidden entrance. Kira was curled up in the corner, trembling. When she saw Danny, she nearly collapsed with relief. "I thought they found me," she whispered. "I could hear them walking above. I was so scared." Danny helped her out of the bunker and back into the trailer. He held her hands, trying to calm her shaking. "You are safe," he said. "They are gone." Kira looked at him with tears in her golden eyes. "Why are you doing this? Why are you risking so much for me?" Danny thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing many times over the past weeks. The answer was simple, but it was also complicated. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "I do not need any other reason." Kira stared at him like he had said something impossible. "Among my people, when someone saves your life, you owe them a life debt. You are bound to them until the debt is repaid." "I am bound to you now, Danny, whether you want it or not." Danny shook his head. "I do not want a debt. I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything." "Then why?" Kira asked again. "Why help me?" "Because humans help each other," Danny said. "Or at least we are supposed to. We do not always live up to that ideal. But some of us try. Some of us believe that kindness does not need a reason. That helping someone who is hurting is just what you do. Kira was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. My people were taught that humans are primitive and cruel, that you only care about yourselves and your own power. But you are not like that. You are different. Maybe, Danny said. Or maybe I am just showing you what humans can be when we choose to be good. The next day, Lucy came to the trailer with bad news. Commander Shaw had put out a reward for information about alien sightings in the area. 5,000 credits for any tip that led to a capture. That is a lot of money for people around here, Lucy said grimly. Someone is going to talk eventually. We cannot keep her hidden forever. Danny knew she was right. The Junkyard's isolation had protected them so far, but it would not last. Shaw was suspicious, and he was clearly not going to give up easily. We need to get her off-world, Danny said. Back to Dracorian space where her people can protect her. And how exactly do we do that? Lucy asked. The consortium controls all the ports. Every ship is checked before it leaves. Danny thought about it. There had to be a way. There was always a way. I know someone, he said slowly. Someone who owes me a favor. A big favor. Lucy raised an eyebrow. Who? An old friend from the war, Danny said. His name is Hank Morrison. He used to be a smuggler before he went legitimate. If anyone can get Kira off this planet, it is him. Lucy looked at Kira, who was listening quietly to their conversation. The young Dracorian had been through so much already, but there was strength in her eyes now. She was not the broken creature Danny had found in that escape pod. She was a survivor. All right, Lucy said. Contact your friend. But we need to move fast. I have a bad feeling about Commander Shaw. He is not the type to let things go. Danny nodded. He walked to his communicator and began composing a message to someone he had not spoken to in years. He hoped that old debts still meant something. Outside, the stars were shining bright and cold above the Junkyard. Somewhere out there, Dracorian ships patrolled their borders, unaware that one of their own was trapped on a human world. Danny looked up at those distant lights and made a silent promise. He was going to get Kira home, no matter what it took. The sun was setting over the Junkyard when Danny Cole heard the sound. It was a weak cry, almost like a wounded animal, coming from somewhere deep in the piles of broken machines and rusted metal. He stopped what he was doing and listened. The wind blew through the scattered debris, making old ship parts creak and groan. For a moment, he thought he had imagined it. But then he heard it again. Danny had worked in this Junkyard for 5 years now. Before that, he had been a combat medic in the Colonial Defense Force. He had seen things during his service that still visited him in his dreams. When he left the military, he wanted nothing more than silence and solitude. The Junkyard on the mining world of Kepler 7b gave him both. He lived in a small trailer at the edge of the salvage yard, spending his days pulling valuable parts from wrecked ships and broken equipment. It was lonely work, but Danny preferred it that way. He set down his tools and walked toward the sound. The Junkyard stretched for miles in every direction, a graveyard of humanity's expansion into the stars. There were crash shuttles, discarded mining rigs, and mountains of scrap that had accumulated over decades. A few days ago, a transport had dropped off a load of salvage from an abandoned orbital station. Most of it was worthless junk, but Danny had not finished sorting through everything yet. The crying sound led him to a small escape pod that had been buried under a pile of twisted metal. The pod had been marked as empty when it arrived. Danny remembered seeing the tag on it. But someone was definitely inside now. He pulled away the debris and forced open the damaged hatch. The smell hit him first. It was blood and sweat and something else, something alien. Danny had encountered many different species during his years in the military. He knew that smell. It was not human. Inside the pod, curled up in the darkness, was a girl. At least, she looked like a girl at first glance. But her skin was covered in deep blue scales that shimmered even in the fading light. 2 large wings were folded against her back, and Danny could see that they were badly damaged. The membranes were torn and bloody. Her golden eyes were half closed, and her breathing was shallow and weak. Danny recognized her species immediately. She was a Dracorian. He had seen them on news broadcasts and in military briefings. The Dracorians were a proud warrior race that had recently entered into a tense Cold War with the Galactic Trade Consortium. The consortium controlled most of human space, and they had been trying to expand into Dracorian territory for years. The relationship between the two powers was hostile. Humans were taught to fear and distrust Dracorians, and Danny assumed the Dracorians felt the same way about humans. He should have walked away. Harboring an alien, especially a Dracorian, could bring serious trouble. The consortium security forces did not take kindly to people who helped their enemies. Danny could lose everything. He could end up in prison or worse. But as he looked at the wounded girl, he saw something that made his heart ache. Her wrists had marks on them, deep grooves in the scales where something had been wrapped tight for a long time. She had been restrained. She had been a prisoner. Danny had seen enough suffering in his life. He had watched good people die in senseless wars. He had held soldiers in his arms as they took their last breaths. He had promised himself when he left the military that he would never turn away from someone who needed help. He would not start now. He reached into the pod and gently lifted her out. She weighed almost nothing. She was young, he realized. Maybe the equivalent of a human teenager. And she was dying. Danny carried her across the junkyard to his trailer. It was a small space, just a bed, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. But it was warm and safe. He laid her down on his bed and went to get his old medical kit. He had kept it all these years, even though he never thought he would use it again. Her wounds were severe. Whatever had happened to her, it had been brutal. There were cuts and burns all over her body. Her wings had been deliberately damaged. Someone had hurt her very badly, and Danny felt a cold anger building in his chest. He worked through the night, cleaning her wounds and bandaging what he could. He did not know much about Dracorian biology, but the basics were similar enough to humans that he could improvise. He gave her water and tried to get her to drink a little broth. She was barely conscious, drifting in and out of awareness. As the sun rose the next morning, Danny sat beside the bed and watched her sleep. He had not slept at all. His mind was racing with questions. How had she ended up in that escape pod? Who had done this to her? And what was he going to do now? The news broadcasts he had seen talked about Dracorians as monsters, dangerous predators who wanted to destroy humanity. But looking at this wounded girl, Danny could not see a monster. He saw a victim, someone who had suffered and needed help. Around midday, she finally opened her eyes fully. Those golden eyes focused on Danny, and for a moment, he saw pure terror in them. She tried to move away, but she was too weak. Her body trembled, and she made a small sound of fear. Danny held up his hand slowly, showing her that he meant no harm. He spoke in a soft voice, the same voice he had used with frightened soldiers on the battlefield. "It is okay," he said. "You are safe now. I am not going to hurt you." She stared at him for a long time. Her breathing was fast, and Danny could see her heart pounding under the scales of her chest. She did not understand. She had probably been taught that humans were cruel and dangerous. And here she was, helpless in the home of one. But Danny just sat there, calm and patient. He had nowhere else to be. He had nothing more important to do than show this frightened girl that not all humans were monsters. Finally, after what felt like hours, she spoke. Her voice was weak and broken, and she struggled with the words of the common language. But Danny understood her clearly. "Please," she whispered. Danny nodded slowly. He reached out and very gently touched her hand. Her scales were cool against his skin. "I will help you," he said. "I promise." She looked at him with those golden eyes, and something changed in her expression. The fear did not go away completely, but there was something else there now. A tiny spark of hope. Danny did not know what the future would bring. He did not know how he was going to keep her safe, or how he was going to explain any of this if someone found out. But he knew one thing for certain. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. Outside, the Junkyard stretched silent and still under the afternoon sun. Somewhere far away, consortium ships patrolled the skies, searching for enemies and threats. But in the small trailer at the edge of the salvage yard, a human and a Dracorian sat together in the quiet, taking the first small steps towards something neither of them could have expected. Trust. 2 weeks passed slowly in the Junkyard. Danny fell into a new routine. Every morning, he would check on the Dracorian girl, change her bandages, and make sure she had food and water. Then he would go out to work, sorting through salvage and keeping up appearances. In the evenings, he would return to the trailer and sit with her, talking softly even when she did not respond. Her recovery was slow, but it was happening. The cuts and burns were healing. Her scales, which had been dull and cracked when he found her, were starting to regain their deep blue shine. But her wings were taking longer. The damage there had been severe, and Danny worried that she might never fly again. She did not speak much at first. When she did, it was in broken common, struggling to find the right words. But Danny was patient. He had learned patience during his years as a medic. Some wounds took time to heal, and not all of them were on the body. On the 5th day, she told him her name. Or rather, she tried to. The sounds were strange and difficult for human ears. A series of clicks and hisses that Danny could not reproduce no matter how hard he tried. She watched him struggle with it and made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You cannot say it," she said. "Human mouths are not made for our words." Danny smiled at her. It was the first time he had smiled in a long time. "Then maybe you should give me a name I can say." She thought about this for a moment. Then she looked at him with those golden eyes and said something that surprised him. "You choose," she said. "Give me a human name." Danny considered this carefully. He looked at her, at the blue scales and the damaged wings and the fierce spirit that was slowly returning to her eyes. He thought about the old stories his grandmother used to tell him when he was a child. Stories about brave heroes and impossible journeys. "Kira," he said finally. "I will call you Kira." She repeated the name several times, testing how it felt on her tongue. Then she nodded. "Kira, I like it." From that day on, she was Kira. As the days passed, Kira grew stronger and started to talk more. She told Danny how she had ended up in that escape pod. The story made his blood run cold. She had been captured by consortium traffickers. There was a black market for Dracorian parts, she explained. Their scales were believed to have medicinal properties. Their blood was even more valuable. Wealthy collectors paid enormous sums for live Dracorians, keeping them as exotic pets or worse. Kira had been taken from a border world where she had been studying human culture. She was young and curious, and she had wandered too far from safety. The traffickers had grabbed her and kept her prisoner for weeks, harvesting her scales and blood while keeping her alive. They were transporting her to a buyer when their ship had an accident. In the chaos, Kira managed to escape in an empty pod, but she was too weak to pilot it properly. She crashed on Kepler 7b and crawled into the Junkyard, hoping to hide until she died. "I thought I would die alone," Kira said quietly. "I thought no one would help me, especially not a human." Danny felt a deep sadness as he listened to her story. He had known that the galaxy could be cruel, but hearing about what had been done to this young girl made him ashamed of his own species. "Not all humans are like that," he said. Kira looked at him for a long moment. "I'm starting to believe you." Danny had one friend on Kepler 7b. Her name was Lucy Brennan, and she ran a repair shop about a mile from the Junkyard. She was a tough woman in her 40s, with calloused hands and a no-nonsense attitude. Danny trusted her more than anyone else in the colony. He knew he could not keep Kira hidden forever. He needed help. So on the 10th day, he went to see Lucy and told her everything. Lucy listened in silence. When Danny finished talking, she stared at him like he had lost his mind. "You have a Dracorian living in your trailer," she said flatly. "A Dracorian. Do you have any idea what the consortium will do to you if they find out?" "I know," Danny said, "but I could not leave her to die." Lucy shook her head slowly, but Danny could see something changing in her expression. She had known him for years. She knew what kind of man he was. "Let me meet her," Lucy said finally. That evening, Lucy came to the trailer. Kira was afraid at first, pressing herself against the wall when the stranger entered. But Lucy approached her slowly and carefully, the same way she would approach a frightened animal. "Hello, Kira," Lucy said gently. "Danny told me about you. I am not here to hurt you." It took time, but Kira eventually relaxed. By the end of the night, she was even answering Lucy's questions about Dracorian culture. Lucy was fascinated despite herself. "She's just a kid," Lucy said to Danny later when they were alone outside the trailer. "Just a scared kid who got hurt bad." "I know," Danny said. Lucy sighed heavily. "All right, I will help you. But we need to be careful. The consortium has been increasing patrols lately. Something has them spooked." Danny nodded. He had noticed the same thing. More ships in the sky. More security officers in the settlement. Something was happening, and he had a bad feeling about it. 2 nights later, Kira's wings had healed enough for her to try flying. It was late, and the Junkyard was dark and quiet. Danny helped her outside, supporting her as she stretched her wings for the first time in weeks. She was nervous. Danny could see it in the way she held herself, the tension in her shoulders. But there was also excitement in her golden eyes, a longing that he recognized. She needed to fly. It was part of who she was. "Take it slow," Danny said. "Do not push yourself too hard." Kira nodded. Then she spread her wings wide and leaped into the air. For a moment, Danny's heart stopped. She wobbled and dipped, and he thought she was going to fall. But then she caught the wind and rose higher, circling above the Junkyard in the moonlight. Her wings gleamed silver and blue, and she made a sound that Danny had never heard before. It was a cry of pure joy. He watched her fly, and he felt something warm spreading through his chest. It was happiness. He had almost forgotten what that felt like. Kira landed beside him a few minutes later, breathing hard but smiling. It was the first time he had seen her truly smile. "Thank you, Danny," she said. "For everything?" Before Danny could respond, his communicator buzzed. It was Lucy, and her voice was tight with fear. "Danny, you need to get inside. Now, Consortium Security is doing door-to-door searches. They are looking for something." Someone reported seeing strange lights near the Junkyard. Danny grabbed Kira's hand and pulled her toward the trailer. His heart was pounding. The hunt had begun.